Basil's childhood could have been pretty lonely considering his parents were never there for him, quite literally, and it seemed he never really had friends other than his grandma who pretty much raised him. That is, until one day he met Aubrey and she introduced him to all of her other friends, which were Kel, Hiro, Sunny, and Marie. From that day on, we got the Basil we all know and love today. Basil is and always has been a kind and gentle person. He's a person that truly cares about others, especially the people closest to him, like his friends and his grandmother. He loves taking care of plants. In fact, his house has tons of them. But the one thing he cherishes the most is the memories he makes with his friends. He tends to capture a lot of the moments they spend together with his camera and puts his photos in his photo album, adding small notes to recall what happened in that specific photo. Basil truly loves and cares for everyone and everything around him and is overall just a nice and good person. Paradoxically, however, this can also be his biggest flaw. To keep it short, Basil sometimes can be too nice and believe too much in the good of others, which leads to a lot of problems for him. And another flaw can be that he's very attached to the things he cares about, for example his friends, flowers, and photos and everything else. And when or if he loses these, he becomes very distressed, as we see several times throughout the game. Even so though, he always cherishes the memories he made and the things he cares about. He's also very quick to forgive others who have wronged him. Overall, Basil was a very happy, gentle, and caring boy who adored everyone and everything. But a day would come that turned his life completely upside down. Sunny, Basil's best friend, and his sister Marie had planned on playing in a recital together. They practiced together for a long time, hoping to have a perfect performance when that day arrived. And eventually, that day did come. Basil was at their house, presumably to prepare or go to the recital with them. Unfortunately, however, what Basil had arrived at was a scene of horror. Sunny was completely frustrated and done with playing with the violin. So much so that he ended up throwing the violin down the stairs, completely shattering it. Marie then went to Sunny and started shouting at him. Sunny attempts to run away, but Marie blocks his path, saying she isn't done talking to him, and eventually Sunny pushes Marie down towards death. He attempts to call out to her, hoping that she shows any kind of sign or response, but nothing happens. He decides that she just needs some rest and takes her up to her bed, and eventually it sinks in for him that Marie has passed away. Sunny breaks down into tears, wanting to call for help but knowing he can't because of what he'd done. No one would believe him unless they saw it happen, but little did he know someone had seen it. Help was there for him in the form of his best friend, Basil. Basil put his hand on Sunny's shoulder and tells him that everything is going to be okay. And so, Basil and Sunny commit their unspeakable act, an attempt to hide the truth. They both drag Marie's body outside and hang it on a tree, staging her death as a suicide. Some time passes, and since that day, everyone is kind of separated and gone their own way. Basil specifically became more closed off and stopped speaking and spending time with his friends, feeling guilty of what he had done. However, one day he is approached by his old friend and possibly first friend, Aubrey. Aubrey saw him sitting alone during lunch, so she asked him if he wanted to study at his house, and after she begged him, he eventually, hesitantly, agreed. They walked to Basil's house quietly, Basil not even looking at her. When they arrived at Basil's room and Aubrey tried to talk to him, he quickly said he needed to go to the bathroom and ran off. After, Aubrey spots his photo album and tries to look through it to relive the memories they made together. But when she opens it, she finds all of the photos blacked out, even the ones of Marie. Aubrey gets confused and furious at this, and in response starts calling Basil names and steals his photo album. Eventually, Aubrey wasn't the only one picking on him either. At this point, Basil was definitely struggling with the guilt of the truth and is quite literally eating him alive. The trauma of that day has made him closed off, anxious, and overall just affected him in many negative ways. And on top of that, one of his first and closest friends is now bullying him and making his life more miserable. And without any kind of help or support to help him deal with all of this, things could only get worse. Four years have passed since that day of the truth. 4 years of living with guilt and trauma for Basil. 4 years without any kind of help. One day, Basil goes to the park where he finds Kim, one of Aubrey's new friends, and asks Kim to tell Aubrey to return his photo album. Kim doesn't want to help Basil because it's not her business, and then suddenly Kel comes in shouting at Kim to leave Basil alone. A small argument happens between them, and then enters Aubrey. Kel argues with Aubrey to stop bullying Basil, and then they all notice that Sunny is here, finally leaving his house after 4 years. Basil tries to talk to Aubrey, but he's pushed back by Kim, which angers Kel, and a bit more arguing goes on, eventually leading to a fight, which quickly ends after Sunny attacks Aubrey with his knife. Her gang escapes from the situation, and Kel and Sunny go to check on Basil. Basil says he's fine, and Kel tells him that Sunny is here too. Basil tells him hi, and for a moment, everything seems okay. Then Kel asks Basil to hang out, but he refuses, and says he should head home since his grandmother hasn't been feeling very well lately. And so, Kel offers to walk him there, and Basil agrees. Once they arrive, it seems like that's the end of their time together for the day. But then, suddenly Basil shouts at them to stay. He apologizes for shouting, I believe, and tells them he has a favor to ask. Kel says he'll do anything, and Basil tells him about how Aubrey has stolen his photo album he worked on when they used to be friends. Kel gets furious hearing this and tells Basil not to worry, him and Sunny will get it back for him, and that despite everything, they're still friends. Basil says goodbye, has one last look at them, probably Sunny more than Kel, and disappears into his home. There's a few small things in this little section I want to point out, the first being how Basil treats his own bullies. We don't know how long exactly Aubrey's group has been bullying Basil, but the fact is that they're definitely doing it. The thing is though, Basil doesn't show hatred or anger towards them. In fact, it seems he does the opposite, showing them kindness and respect. Instead of fighting or arguing against them, he simply respectfully asks to talk with Aubrey, or at least convince Kim to help him, but sadly, she doesn't really want anything to do with him. I think this small detail says a lot about Basil's character. It shows that he prefers to solve things peacefully rather than fight or argue, and it also shows just how kind of a person he can be. I mean, these people show no type of empathy for him, and yet he still acts kind towards them, even if it is to his disadvantage. He is truly a very gentle person. Unfortunately for him, however, the hooligans are not so gentle and even physically bully him as well. Luckily though, the saviors of all people, Kel and Sunny, are here to defend them. Afterwards, we have the little reunion between Sunny, Basil, and Kel. Basil seeming a bit nervous about it, which is most likely because Sunny is there and, you know, the truth and everything. They all walk Basil home after a bit of talking, and when Sunny and Kel start leaving, Basil yells at them to not go. Now this might be a bit of a stretch, but this line may mean more than just one thing. Obviously, the way Basil wanted it to be interpreted was for them to wait a bit so Kel can ask them to retrieve the photo album. Simple enough, right? But at the same time, it might have been Basil actually wanting to spend time with them and him not wanting to be alone anymore. This whole time for the past 4 years, he's had to be alone, and he finally has a chance to spend with his old friends, even if it's just Kel and Sunny. I think even if it was just for a small moment, Basil did snap and truly showed how he truly felt, which he seemed to regret quickly afterward, which is something people that have trouble opening up can feel after doing so. But then again, he did quickly ask them for a favor, so maybe I'm just over-analyzing a bit too much here. But anyway, then we have Basil saying they used to be friends and Kel reassuring him that they still are friends. I think this kind of shows that Basil believes that his old friendships are gone and unrecoverable, especially knowing what he did. He could never bring himself to be their friend again as long as the guilt lived inside of him. But of course, Kel being Kel assures him that no matter what, they are still friends, even if there is a 4-year gap of nothing between them. And so, Kel and Sunny start their adventure looking for Basil's photo album, while Basil is once again left alone at home. So after some friendly convincing, Kel and Sunny eventually recover Basil's photo album and head to his house to return it to its rightful owner. They meet Polly and tell Basil they've retrieved the photo album. Basil is happy hearing this news and Polly invites them over for dinner, which they accept. Kel comments on Basil's flower and Basil adds that some are still alive from when they used to come over more often. Kel suggests looking at the photo album, and Basil seems a bit hesitant at first, but after some convincing he agrees to do so. While we do, we find out that some of the photos are still missing. Kel tells Basil not to worry about it because he and Sunny will take care of it as they always do, and he tells Basil to focus on going back to his happy, carefree self, which Basil says he'll try to do. Then Polly asks for help on finishing the food, which Kel volunteers to do, leaving Sunny and Basil alone together. And if Sunny talks to Basil at this point, he seems very anxious, nervous, very awkward. Either way, you can tell he's definitely screaming internally at this interaction. Anyway, Sunny takes the phrase "make yourself at home" quite literally by going into Basil's grandma's room where she lies unconscious. I don't really know, but then Basil enters soon after Sunny does. The poor boy tries to make small talk with another poor boy who won't talk, which doesn't really go well. Basil tells Sunny about his grandma being unable to hear them and how it's been a while since they've seen each other and that it's nice that he's still around. He then gives Sunny his photo album, saying that Sunny should have it since he can probably make more use of it. Basil talks about how a lot has happened since the photos were taken and that it all feels like it was just a bad dream. And he says he thinks he took photos of what he was most afraid to lose. Those cards must have meant a lot, huh? Finally, Basil says maybe one day things could return to how they were before. Suddenly, Kel shouts for them to go eat, and once again Basil has one last look before leaving the room. They all sit down to eat dinner and Kel and Polly converse about Hiro's return from college. And then Kel notices Sunny has Basil's photo album, which Basil explains he thought he should have it. Kel says that's cool and it makes sense since Sunny is moving away. This is news to Basil. He's very shocked at hearing this information, and Kel clarifies that he's moving in 3 days, and suddenly Basil gets up and says he needs to use the bathroom. As he leaves, he once again has another look at Sunny and after dashes away. Next, Sunny casually barges into the bathroom where Basil is, where we find him repeating to himself, "Everything is going to be okay." Basil notices Sunny and asks if he can also see something behind him. Speaking to Basil again, he asks Sunny why he looks so scared and that everything is supposed to be okay now, but clearly it isn't. When Sunny leaves, Basil asks him not to leave him again, but unfortunately he does, leaving Basil in a terrible state alone in the bathroom. If you try to talk to him again after reuniting with Kel, he has no response, ending day 1 for Basil. Yeah, it's definitely not looking too good for Basil. Okay, let's at least put one positive thing here, and that is Basil's ability to care for flowers for so long. I mean, the dude's flowers are 4 years old, if not even more, and like Kel said, that's some dedication right there. Basil was definitely very good at caring for things, and I think this can definitely carry over to other things like his friends and family. As a matter of fact, the reason Basil is really good at caring for plants might be because he's good at caring for others, especially those close to him. In short, Basil is for sure a very caring person, not just for his things, but for the people around him. Like the only plant I've ever seen for that long is grass, and trees if that counts. Tree gang? Anyway, now for the not so fun part. So when Kel tells Basil to look at the photo of him, there's a bit of hesitation to do so. But before he shows hesitation, he says, that's before going into saying he might not want to. Now, maybe overanalyzing again, but that little moment before he says, I don't know, seems to have a little bit of excitement to it. Like he wanted to say, that's a great idea or something along the lines of that, but his guilt holds him back from doing so. Almost like it's saying you can't be friends with them after what you did. Or taking this line at face value can show that Basil simply doesn't want to look at the past, knowing that he played a role in ruining all of it. And it would also remind him of what he did, which is why he tells Kel he doesn't know about looking at the album. But in the end, Kel manages to convince him to do so, and all seems to go well from there. That is, until Kel decides to help Polly, leaving the trauma buddies together. I think it's pretty obvious to tell that Basil is kind of anxious being left with Sunny like this for very obvious reasons. He's probably scared of what Sunny thinks of him, and just finally being with him after 4 years is probably making him very nervous. Which is honestly understandable. I mean, if I spend time with someone after a very long time of not being with them, I'm just as terrified as he is here. So then we have the scene where Sunny and Basil are in his grandma's room, and he gives Sunny the photo album. The biggest thing that stands out here is Basil saying how it all felt like a bad dream, how he took photos of what he was most afraid to lose, and that he hopes one day things could return to the way they were before. I think this really highlights how Basil was very attached to his friends, and I was kind of stuck to the past, unable to move on from those days and the truth. This whole scene is pretty much talking about how he misses those days with his friends and how he really wants everything to go back to how it was. He really shows no intention of moving on. He's just really stuck on the past, dreaming of the day everything goes back to normal. The day that everything is okay again. And really, that's no way to live. Which can sadly show that Basil is most likely suffering from depression, even if he tries to hide it from everyone else. Then Basil and Sunny go down to eat, and once again, all kinda seems well, until Kel mentions Sunny is moving, and Basil seems to get extremely anxious at this news, and goes to what seems to be a safe spot where no one can see him how he truly is, in the bathroom. Firstly, I want to mention the fact that Basil is always looking at Sunny. Even before this, when Kel goes to help Polly, he's constantly looking where Sunny is. Now, we don't really know the specific reason for this, but I think it's because Basil is finally seeing his friend after 4 years, and it's kind of like, oh my god, that's him. That and the fact that he probably wants to say so much to him, but he feels he can't because of his guilt. Anyway, bathroom time. So Basil is in the bathroom repeating to himself, everything is going to be okay, all while everything looks not so okay. He asks Sunny if he sees something behind him and if everything is really okay now. This part truly shows the real state of Basil's mental health, completely shattered and broken, trying to convince himself that everything's okay the way it is, when really nothing is okay, and is stuck in an endless cycle of suffering. All because he's completely surrounded by his guilt rather than his friends, and it's quite literally eating him alive until he can no longer take it. Then when Sunny leaves the room, Basil pleads for him to stay, to not leave him alone again, which Sunny does, which furthermore shows that Basil is just tired of being alone. He just wants his friends and support back because he can't withstand the pain for much longer. He wants Sunny to keep their promise of being there for each other. After a rough night, Basil is out and about near some familiar trees. He's approached by Kel and Sunny, and he greets them. Kel asks him if he's feeling better after yesterday, and Basil almost panics, asking Kel what he means, which Kel explains that he had a bad stomach ache, which Basil goes along with presumably to hide what actually happened. Kel once again asks Basil to hang out, which he once again declines, this time with no explanation and saying sorry afterwards. Kel says it's okay, he doesn't really have to force himself, and Kel and Sunny go on their merry way. The only thing that really happens here is Basil panicking at the fact that Kel brought up what happened to Basil last night, thinking he might have been figured out, which goes to show just how much Basil does not want those around him to know his true feelings or his true mental state, for Kel at least. And I think a big reason for that is because showing his true feelings may reveal a bit too much and ultimately lead to them discovering the truth, which is what Basil doesn't want. Jumping forward a bit, Kel and Sunny find out from Polly that Basil has gone missing, and so they set out to find their friend. They look for him near the trees he was before and suddenly hear Basil's voice shouting for help. So they rush to the scene, which is their old hangout spot. They find Basil being harassed by the hooligans who are telling him to leave and to stop making a scene. Kel and Sunny arrive and Kel tells them to stop hurting Basil. Kim tells Kel to go away because this is their spot, but Kel tells them this used to be our spot. They continue arguing, which once again eventually leads to a fight, and after a bit of pepper spray, the fight ends and Aubrey's friends flee from the scene, leaving Aubrey with everyone else. Aubrey becomes enraged and asks her old friends why they keep coming back into her life, which Kel responds by saying he just wants them to stop messing with Basil, and that they all used to be friends. Aubrey calls them messed up and asks where any of them were when Marie passed away. Then she walks up to Basil and tells him he's the worst of them all after what he'd done. Basil tries to say something to her, but she quickly turns and pushes him away into the lake. Kel sends Sunny in to save Basil, but unfortunately he fails to do so. But luckily, someone capable enough to save both of them appeared, and his name is, quite fittingly, Hero, Kel's older brother and their old friend. Basil gets rescued but is unconscious, so the group decide to take him home despite Aubrey telling him to wait. Basil is taken home and into his bedroom, and when interacting with him, he says, "Sunny, there's no way out of this, is there?" So obviously the biggest thing that happens to Basil here is getting pushed into the lake by one of his old best friends at that. I mean, just imagine your first friend of the group who introduced you to everyone else, the one person who probably treated you the kindest while you were all alone, suddenly calling you the worst and putting you in a life-threatening situation, even if it was an accident. I'm pretty sure this must have been quite a confusing and painful situation for Basil, although we don't really know his reaction since he was unconscious afterwards. But still, I'm sure it's probably just added even more to all the things he's already dealing with, making his mental state even worse than it already was. For the first half of Sunny's last day in faraway town, Basil is absent for pretty much all of it, because his grandmother was rushed into intensive care last evening. So he's at the hospital visiting her. That evening, Sunny and his gang return to Basil's house to see if he's come back. And he has, but he isn't willing to talk to anyone. So his friends decide to stay there for him because that's what friends are for, and they don't want to make the mistake of leaving each other again. Later that night, Sunny wakes up after remembering the truth and enters Basil's room to save him. Basil is relieved to see Sunny and says he's glad he came. Basil says that day, when Marie fell, it couldn't have been Sunny. It must have been something behind him. He says Sunny's a good person and a good person would never do that. He tells Sunny after all this time he's come back for him, but tomorrow he's moving away. Basil snaps and asks him how he could do that. It's so mean. Basil says there's something all around him now and asks Sunny if he can see it too. Sunny then tries to leave the room only to be stopped by something. Basil seems distressed at this and asks him where he is going and tells him to stop trying to leave him, saying stop it several times. Basil backs away from Sunny, telling him he doesn't want to be alone. Not again. Then he says Sunny wouldn't leave him. That's just not like him. It has to be something behind him again. Basil gets enveloped by his something and Basil asks Sunny if he also sees it. He tells something to stay away from Sunny and he tells Sunny that he'll protect him no matter what. Basil says when Marie died, when Sunny blacked out all of his photos, he didn't say anything because he didn't want anyone to think it was Sunny's fault, because Sunny wouldn't do something like that. Basil says he'll save Sunny again, that he'll get rid of something once and for all, and finally everything is going to be okay. This is where we see Basil finally snap, and there's a lot of reason why he does so. The latest one being that his grandmother was put into intensive care. He cares a lot about his grandmother since she's probably the only one who's been there all his life, and losing her will leave him very devastated, especially in the state he's in now. On top of that, the one and only person who could give him some kind of company, especially since they're the only ones who know the truth, is moving away and leaving him, leaving Basil completely alone with the truth and the guilt that came with it. Along with that are several other problems built up inside of him, like the bullying from Aubrey. All in all, everything slowly building up leads to where we are now, where Basil is completely losing it. Now the biggest takeaway from all of this is the fact that Basil tries his absolute best to take away the blame from Sunny for the truth, convincing himself that something behind him did it, because Sunny would never push Marie down the stairs. He does the same when Sunny tries to leave the room, leaving him alone again, and it's not because he's choosing to, it's because something behind him is forcing him to. Basil has convinced himself for years that it wasn't Sunny's fault. He simply cannot accept the fact that one of his best friends, who was so kind and caring towards him, could be capable of doing such a horrible thing. But here we are, and that is indeed the truth of what happened that day. It was indeed an accident, but Sunny's fault nonetheless. This is where I believe Basil's strongest flaw plays a role in all of this. Like I said before, sometimes Basil believes too much in the good in others. For example, when he tried to talk to the hooligans to get his album back, and it backfired almost every time. But this, however, is taking it to a whole nother level. He believes so much in the good in Sunny, he completely takes the blame away from him and tries to place it onto something that simply doesn't exist. As he says, he believes Sunny is a good person and he would never do such a thing. And he believed in this so much led to him taking the extreme measures to hide the truth and the fact that Sunny blacked out the photos in the photo album. Which is why I'm calling this his strongest flaw, considering the things it leads to him to do and the consequences it causes. And one final thing I want to mention is that Basil is able to take the blame away from Sunny and place it onto something, but we never hear him say something made him do what he did. Which is a small detail, but it shows that Basil is able to dissociate blame from others, but not himself, showing that he's pretty much been drowning in guilt all this time, and he is able to forgive others easily, but not himself. Basil, in an attempt to save Sunny from something, starts attacking him, initiating arguably the most tragic fight in the entire game. We have two traumatized kids fighting each other because they can no longer handle the guilt of what they did 4 years ago, and they don't know what to do about it anymore. This seems to be their last attempt at getting rid of something before giving up on everything. If you look at Basil in this fight, you can see he's in tears, and Sunny is afraid, unable to do anything to calm his fear. I think it's pretty obvious that none of these kids want to actually do this, but they feel that they have to. Basil even says there's no way out of this, is there? Basil asks Sunny if he's selfish for doing this, and then he asks him if he hates him. He tells Sunny to stop struggling because he's just so tired. As the battle drags on, Sunny snaps, becoming stressed out, and the fight becomes an all-out battle, perhaps even a battle to the death. After a few exchanges, Basil asks Sunny why won't he stop, and stabs him in the eye with the shears he's been holding this whole time, ending the fight with both of them eventually passing out and being taken to the hospital. Basil is has been and always will be a kind, gentle, and caring person who cherishes all he has and all of the people in his life. He's very good at caring for things he cares about, like his flowers, friends, photos, and more. He's a person that no matter what will always be kind to you, even if you aren't kind to him. Basil will always prefer to solve things peacefully rather than end up causing unnecessary fights, which also makes it very easy for him to forgive others' actions. In fact, Basil is so kind it sometimes ends up hindering him, but that doesn't stop him from being so. Unfortunately, one day his life changed for the worse and completely broke him, but even so, sometimes throughout the game we still see remnants of our Basil and his kindness. He never stopped being who he truly is inside. Sadly, we never truly see Basil get better throughout the game as he's suffering from his trauma throughout most of it. That is, however, until Sunny is finally able to overcome his something, being able to smile once again after so long. And that smile is exactly what makes Basil something disappear as well, because it let him know that now, after all that pain, everything is going to be okay again.